502 Direct Loan Program Overview and Updates. My name is Shantaria Charleston, and I will be your host for today's webinar. If you have not already done so, please ensure that you have access to both the audio and video portion of the webinar. To access the PowerPoint for today's call, please follow the link on your meeting confirmation email. All participants are in listen-only mode, which means your line is muted. However, we are very interested in your questions and feedback, so to submit a question during today's webinar, please use the Q&A box that will appear on the lower right-hand side of your screen. Again, today's webinar is being recorded. The recording and all materials will be made available on HAC's website, www.ruralhome.org, shortly following the webinar. And so I see quite a few familiar names in the webinar today, but for those of you that are not familiar with the Housing Assistance Council, HAC is a national nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C. that assists local organizations with building affordable homes in rural America. With the mission to improve housing conditions for the rural poor, HAC places a special emphasis on striving to serve the poorest of the poor in the most rural places. HAC emphasizes local solutions, empowerment of the poor, reduced dependency, and self-help strategies. HAC assists with the development of both single and multifamily homes and promotes homeownership for working, low-income rural families through a self-help sweat equity construction method. So if you're interested in learning more about HAC services or products, HAC has an office near you. If you have any questions or require additional assistance, please contact your nearest HAC office. The addresses and contact information for the HAC national office as well as the regional offices are currently being displayed on your screen. Also, please mark your calendars and join us for the following webinars. We will have a Section 504 overview and updates webinar next week on April 6th. We will also have our third part of our Community Reinvestment Act webinar coming up on April 13th. We have a few place-based trainings. We have our Veterans Symposium taking place in Washington, D.C. on May 18th. We also have a 502 packaging certification course coming up in June in Burlington, Vermont, as well as our 2016 Rural Housing Conference taking place in Washington, D.C. in December. So thank you again for joining us for today's webinar, USDA Section 502 Direct Loan Program Overview and Update. So now I'd like to welcome today's speaker, Jean Gonzalez. Jean is the Regional Director of HAC's Southwest Regional Office located in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Jean has been working in rural housing for over 30 years, and over the course of his career, he's gained expertise in property management, green housing rehabilitation, and affordable housing. Jean's extensive experience includes subdivision development, single-family housing rehabilitation, Section 202 housing, and Sections 514 and 516 farm labor projects. Jean also provides training and technical assistance in green building, energy conservation, home rating, and green rehabilitation for single and multifamily projects. So at this point, I would like to go ahead and turn the webinar over to Jean. Jean, are you there?
I'm here.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Terry. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I know some of you are taking away from your lunch hour and stuff, but hopefully today's overview is just a small overview. It's not too long, it's about 20 slides, but we will discuss all the 502 Direct program. While we look at this slide, what I would like is for Terry to maybe do a small poll now, just so we can get an idea of what kind of expertise or experience we have out in the audience today. So, Terry, if you could do that, and then we'll just kind of look at that.
All right, thanks, Jean. So we have on the screen, we're asking everyone to complete this phrase. I use or have used the USDA RD Section 502 Single Family Direct Loan Program, A lot, B, somewhat, C, a little, D, not applicable, or no vote. So Jean, looks like we have quite a few votes coming in. All right, we'll give another second or two. Looks like a lot of folk at 34.7% have lots of experience with the program. And just as many have just heard about the program and wants to know more.
That's a good crowd. All right, well, we'll try not to disappoint you. Okay, so like I said today's just basically an overview of the 502 program. The program has been around for a long time, I think since the 1940s, and it's helped a lot of very low and low income families with the opportunity to provide and obtain adequate, modest, decent housing in rural areas. Again, we're talking about all rural areas. Again, rural areas, so, we'll give the definition in the next slide. But as we see right now, this is the 502 program is a critical program, and it's a critical mortgage credit that's available for low-income families and very low-income families where maybe such a credit hasn't been available, or if any credit that is available is probably something that low and very low-income families or residents couldn't afford. So there again, it's very important that the 502 program is available in rural areas. And anybody that lives in rural areas or that has traveled through rural areas, you can see how things have changed in rural areas. And all those little towns that used to have businesses there, they got interstates going by them now, and a lot of that area is just dying because it's just the economy base isn't there the way it used to be back in the past. So the 502 direct loan, the purpose of the loan, again, rural development provides direct loans as well as guaranteed loans. Today we're basically just going to be dealing with the 502 direct loan. We're not going to be touching on the guaranteed loans and those type of things. But again, this is for rural areas. Rural areas, the way it's been identified or recognized by the rural development is that it's open country, and with populations of 10,000 or less, and under certain conditions, the towns or the cities could go between 10 and 35,000. Most of the time, it's going to be 10 to 25,000. In order to get it allocated to 35,000 population, you'd have to go to your handbill and 3550.1, and then you have to deal with all these different exceptions and different reasons that you would want to raise that population to 35,000. Again, this isn't something that's going to be easy. You have to bring up all these exceptions and different reasons why you want to bring it up to 35. One of the things that we've done in the past is that if you're working with farm labor housing, farm workers, we've seen that increase to population areas up to 50,000. So depending if you're working with a certain area or certain population, it's easier to get those increases. Again, we're talking about low-income families. Low income is defined as between 50 and 80% of the area median income. Very low is 50% in medium. And if nothing else, you'll take away that definition, because I think they remind us of that definition 4 or 5 times throughout the PowerPoint. So I'll try not to read every one, but again, remember the low and very low. And again, rural development is a rural program. It's a service area strictly for rural areas. This is a link that you can go to. I tried it yesterday. It was working yesterday. And it's a link that you can go to with USDA, and it talks about the service area. If you want to see where your service area is, what the income limits are, eligibility property, whether it's eligible or not, this is the link that you can go to. Most of the time when we do trainings, this is probably a 2-3 hour link, where we take you through the link. It'll go by county, by city, by state, however you want to break it down, and it's all on that link. And you can take it directly to the property you're looking at, the land you're looking at, and it'll tell you if it's an eligible area, what your income limits are, and so on. Some of the key features for the 502 Direct program, again, it's directly funded by USDA or the federal government. Down payments are usually not required, depending on what the workout plan and also what the interest rate and the ratios are when they're doing their intake. It'll depend on this. Payment assistance is available for those that qualify. Most of the time, you have to be at 60% of medium or less in order to qualify for the payment assistance. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Extended loan amortization terms, again, we'll talk about the loan terms a little bit later on. They are longer than a regular loan, but we'll talk about those. The promissory note, once your loan closes, it is at a fixed rate and it stays at a fixed rate throughout the term of the loan. Some closing costs may be financed, again, depending on whether the loan or the applicant can carry an additional cost on the loan, whether that will be added to the loan or not. Again, private mortgage insurance isn't needed up front, and no fee is required. And then refinancing or under special circumstances, again, there are several different types of loans that we get into. We have the initial loan, which is a no agency existing loan. You have an eligible buyer and wants to purchase or construct a dwelling. We have what we call an assumed terms and condition. This is an assumable loan upon a new purchaser. And most of the time the rates and the terms are new, but the purchaser will assume the remaining debt of that property. Sometimes due to the demise of a homeowner or a partner, these are transferred over to family or other living relatives and so on. But that's an assumed loan. The other one is a subsequent loan, and these are the original purchaser might have needed additional money to rehab the unit and stuff, and that loan is just added on to the existing loan. So these are some of the loans that are covered by rural development. But again, down payment assistance isn't needed, and most of the closing costs, like I said, most of those will be financed, and sometimes there is no closing cost depending on how the programs are put together or projects. Again, all USDA single-family home programs are under the 7 CFRs Part 3550, and these come in 2 handbooks. The 2 handbooks, one of them is handbook number 1, 3550. It covers all the tasks that is done by the rural development offices, and the handbook 2 is 3550. This explains the agency's central servicing center, and this is in St. Louis. But again, you can go to this link. They are big binders. One of the things I always used to tell my site managers was to be familiar with those, have them ready, always understand where they're at, and be sure that you're up to date on all the updates and ANNs and notices and all numbered letters. Again, I'm not going to get a lot into these handbooks because there is going to be, USDA will be hosting 3 webinars starting in early April to mid-April, and it'll be outlining all the updates to the handbook. So you need to stay tuned to Rural Development's website for further detail of when those websites will be coming up. But again, there's numerous updates coming up, hopefully in April, and they'll have an explanation for all the different updates. Some of the other instructions that govern the 502 program loan or the project include the 1924C. This is the site and building design. This is, again, most of these are forms that would have to be filled out. You got the 1924A, construction and repair, again, and then you have the 1940-I. This is the truth and lending requirements under USDA lending programs. And of course, you have the 1901E, which covers the civil rights for all the borrowers and lenders. So by now, you probably got a loan. You got your loan. You're on a fixed rate. You got a fixed promissory note rate that's into your loan. Again, no private mortgage insurance is required up front. So, you know, up to now. So now it comes when you're underwriting these loans, it's going to be determined whether the loan can be up to 33 years or if the loan term has to be, if the applicant is below 60%, he might be eligible for assistance, and maybe the loan term can be extended up to a 30-year loan term. Any kind of loan terms for manufactured housing, the maximum is going to be a 30-year manufactured home loan, or a 502 direct loan, sorry. So again, you know, they can be up to 33 years is a standard, 38 years if it's 60% of median income or less and can't afford a 33-year term, and all terms for manufactured homes are going to be 30 years. One of the things I want to stress here is that, again, there's several variations of using the basic 502 direct loan program. You can use the program using doing the mutual self-help program. This is where a sponsor will get, you know, anywhere from 8 to 10 families together. All the families work together in constructing their units. Nobody moves into the unit until all units are complete. And they also get a subsidy, or they get a break on their mortgages when they come down to doing the self-help. Most of the time, self-help families have to complete 65% of the manual labor needed to construct that home. And it'll vary depending on the program, the houses, and the different sponsors. Manufactured housing, again, manufactured housing has been used a lot in colonial areas. Native American lands are starting to use manufactured housing. We also have what we call leveraged loans, rural development or leveraged loans, sometimes with banks, other funders, depending on who's doing the long-term financing. But rural development will subordinate first position with a 20% funding, or any kind of funding that comes in at 20% or more. So they're willing to subordinate their position to second. One of the things that we've seen a lot is we've done a lot of 502 loans for condos, especially like in Colorado. They're doing a lot of condos with using the 502 loan. Community land trusts, we've done a lot of units on community land trusts and land trust areas in southern New Mexico, Texas, Colorado, Utah. But we've done a lot of nice passive solar straw bale houses in southern New Mexico, passive solar adobe houses in West Texas, using the 502 direct loan as the long-term financing. The housing demonstration program, these programs have been used on Native American lands to demonstrate various housing, multifamily, single family, using straw bale, passive solar, Hogan construction. So they've been used all over, along with colonial areas and so on. And then the Rural Housing Disaster Loan Program, of course, everybody's heard of that, and Katrina. So those are just some of the ways that you can use the 502 direct. It doesn't have to be strictly home. It can be condos. It can be on trust land. It can be done on Native American land. So it's just the ways that you're putting your program together, different funding sources, and what it is that you're targeting as far as construction. Again, the interest rate and payment assistance, like we talked about, some families will get, if you're under 60%, you may qualify for payment assistance. Interest rate is set by rural housing every month, but once your loan closes, it is set at that's your interest rate, and the rate is fixed for the term of your loan. Again, the purpose of the borrower calculations, this modifies their payment and their need for payment assistance if it's needed. And again, payment assistance is given as a subsidy to the families for an installment payment, and sometimes it'll lower their interest rate up to 1% interest payments, which really make these houses affordable. I've seen payments as low as $98 to $120 a month for a mortgage payment using this method. And the last bullet there, this basically says that anybody that receives subsidy eventually has to pay that subsidy back to the government, but you're not paying the full subsidy back. There's a special formula and calculation they use in the subsidy repayment agreement, and with that, you most of the time, you only end up paying a portion of the subsidy you received, and you get a borrower's equity in there. So by the time you end up paying it and going through all this formula and all the paperwork, you're probably only paying maybe a fourth of the subsidy you received back to the federal government. And then again, you'll have options. You know, you want to pay it all at once, you want to add it to the loan, do you want to make monthly payments? But again, you know, we won't get into all that. That's more or less when the mortgage is due and you're closing out your loan. But again, all it says is if you receive subsidy somewhere down the line, you're going to have to pay it back. Eligibility requirements, again, you know, we talk about all the families. Again, you're going to be dealing with very low-income families, but the family must be without adequate housing and be able to afford a mortgage payment. Again, you know, we're talking about the ratios, and once you do your intake and your write-ups and all that underwriting, then you'll determine what kind of family, what kind of loan the family can qualify and those type of things. Again, here's a link, you know, again, we talk about the income limits. This is a link to where you can see where you're at anywhere in the country and see what the income limits are at 50% in the area in medium and low income. So again, this is just a link. If you're in Texas, Alabama, Alaska, wherever you may be today, if you want to click on this and you want to find out what it is that you're going to be looking for, what income limits in your area, this is out. Income limits are done every year. They usually come out in the spring of every year, usually around April, somewhere around now. The new area limits should be coming out. But again, they're updated every year, and we'll be on this. Again, eligibility requirements. By this time, the applicant has probably applied 2 or 3 different places. He's unable to obtain credit elsewhere. The applicant is willing to demonstrate the willingness and ability to repay the debt. And again, depending on the repayment feasibility and your repayment ratios, this is going to determine the loan amount and how much assistance, if the family needs assistance, how much they'll get. Again, the repayment ratios are very important. Homebuyer education, we'll talk about this a little bit later on. But again, the repayment feasibility, the repayment ratios, you know, we'll talk about certification here in just a little bit also. But when you're doing your write-ups or you're doing your intake on your families, again, this is very important because there's ways that you can play with your ratios in order to maybe get the family to qualify. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on. Again, credit requirements. Again, you know, we talk about the credit score isn't the driven factor for lending decisions. If you do have a good credit score, 640 or better, you can expedite the loan process just a little bit more and a little bit faster. Alternate credit. Again, we're talking about alternate credit here. I'm not going to get a lot into alternate credit because, again, that's going to be updated with the new handbills coming out, hopefully in April. And there will also be, again, all these handbills are going to be released hopefully in April, and they'll be taking you through all the different verifications of credit, alternate credit, and acceptable credit. Again, indicators of unacceptable credit, we all know what those are, repossessions, failure to pay, repos, liens, those type of things. One thing that is clear with the 502 program, as with other government programs, if you have a federal judgment against you in federal court, you're not eligible to participate in a 502 program or receive a loan. Again, these are just general requirements, credit requirements. Again, the other applicant requirements, the applicant currently doesn't have an adequate home. They're going to use the home as their primary residence, and they're at least 18 years of age and can incur debt. Some states, I think if you're married and you're 16, you're eligible to incur debt. I think there's 2 or 3 states like that. Again, we talked about being debarred. You can't be debarred from any federal programs. If you got any federal judgments against you, that's what this is talking about. You have to be a U.S. citizen, U.S. national citizen, or a qualified alien. and of course, you have to provide proof of identity. We talked about home buyer education. Home buyer education is only needed for first-time home buyers. Again, you have to receive the course. I think most of the time it's a 6 to 8 hour course. They do pre and post counseling with the home buyer education. Your certificate, once you do get a certificate or the family goes through a certificate, it's good for 1 year up to the year of closing the loan. Rural development offices do contain a list or maintain a list of providers who provide home buyer education. Most of the time, the home buyer education is either done by a nonprofit or another government entities, and there may be a small fee or there may not be a fee at all. But again, packagers should refer homeowners or home borrowers to pre-home buyer programs first. And I know there used to be a lot of them around before, but lately I think they've been getting cut back along with funding. So again, rural development should have a list of providers. And then sometimes if there is a charge, the fee can be included into the loan if the family can carry the additional cost in their loan. Property standards, again, there's going to be a lot of new codes or a lot of new unnumbered letters coming out with the new codes. Again, this is going to be hopefully done in now in April. But again, properties must be designated in rural areas. Again, we talked about how you can identify the rural area you're in, whether it's designated or not. Housing must be modest in size, design, and cost. We'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. Market value must not exceed area loan limits. Again, we're talking about the loan limits, and you can get online and see what your loan limits are for your area. Again, houses have to meet the state building codes for rural housing services type standards. The basic code right now between HUD and USDA was that there was agreement saying that any new construction, whether it be HUD money or USDA money, that all building codes for 2009 construction building codes would be followed. So these are your 2009 ICC building codes, and then you also have your ICCE building codes, and this is your energy codes. So again, these are very important when you're coming to building your units, because under these codes, you have to caulk the top plates, you have to caulk the seal plates, you have to do air leakage penetration throughout your units, you have to insulate your slabs in certain areas. The insulation, R values have gone up in most of the country, so you have to be very familiar with these building codes, because when they come out to inspect, you don't want to have to go through change orders and these type of things. So when you're building your design and you're designing your units, it's a good idea to maybe have them reviewed by a green reader or a HERS rater, somebody just to make sure that these codes are being met and so on. Very important. Again, we talked about modest. What's modest to some isn't modest to others. But right now, until the new notices come out or the new modest housing definition to come out again with the new handbooks in April, for right now, a modest unit must be considered modest for that area. The lot size should not exceed 30% of the appraised value, and the lot cannot be subdivided to make another house or another lot. Okay. One of the other components for a modest house that is in effect right now will probably change in the coming future, and that's that a modest house is typically should be 1,800 square feet or less above ground living area. So again, very important. Can't be over 1,800 depending on the family size again. One of the things we run into is that the family will come in, it's a family of 3, they'll want an 1,800 square foot home, but really, they should, go with a 1,400 square foot home. Depending on what you need is what you should apply for with rural development. Just because a modest home is 1,800, you don't need an 1,800 square foot home. Again, depending on what the loan area limits are, again, here's a link. You can go to the area loan limits for your area. They're renewed annually, and they're reviewed and updated every year, again, about this time of the year. But again, there's going to be new definitions coming out for modest. Okay, and then these are some of the other property standards. They talked about prohibited features in the other slide. Prohibited features are in this, are your in-ground swimming pools and any kind of income-producing structures or land. So strictly, we're just talking housing units, and a lot big enough to support that unit. All units, all building, all construction is going to be subject to an environmental review and also home inspections. Most of the time, hopefully, in your area, there's a state or county inspector that can do some of these inspections. I've run into a lot of people in rural areas where there is no inspector and there is no state inspector or county inspector. In situations like that, you're going to have to hire a special inspector to come in and maybe pay extra for that inspector to come in and do these inspections, whether it's a HERS rater or it's just another inspector, depending on who that is. Manufactured housing, these are permanently installed. Manufactured housing, like I said, they'll bring them out. They're already built. Most of the units, when they're leaving manufactured housing and they leave the site, they're already rated at a HERS rating of probably 65. So they're already energy efficient. They just need to be set up. Manufactured housing, these all have to be set up on a foundation or a slab, and they need to be purchased from an authorized dealer and moved and installed according to the standards that they set for those. Again, housing construction and safety standards, thermal and site standards, all these have to be met. We kind of just talked about those a little bit in the past slide, but again, all your energy codes, the thermal codes, all this have to be met, whether it's manufactured housing or new construction. Well, nowadays you'll get real good deals with swimming pools, you know. You have to pass them up. All right, contractor methods. These are different option methods. Once a buyer becomes qualified, there's different ways of construction can be done. It can be a contractor method. Again, the borrower qualifies for a home loan, contracts with the builder to construct the home. Again, the borrower method, this guy, he's available. He can basically act as a general contractor for the project. Again, this doesn't happen too often because you want to make sure that you have somebody that you can come back to. A guy that comes in and says he can build his own house sometimes isn't the best qualified contractor. So again, not used a lot of times, but can be used as a general contractor. Owner-built method, again, this demonstrates expertise to handle subcontractors, build your own home. There's different ways of doing this. They talk about the conditional commitment. A conditional commitment is just a written assurance from rural development that a qualified builder, dealer, contractor, or a seller that a dwelling to be constructed or rehabilitated will be certified as accepted to purchase for a qualified loan applicant. And again, basically what this says is that the rural development is willing to lend you money on this house if it is built this way and is built exactly the way the specifications are, and it comes in at this price. They're willing to commit and send you a conditional commitment that they're willing to loan on that unit for an eligible family. Mutual self-help. I think a lot of people and a lot of groups are familiar with the mutual self-help program. This is where a sponsor, it's usually a sponsor or a nonprofit group that comes in. They get a 523 grant, which assists them in paying their staff to commit to the self-help housing. They usually work with the families of 8 to 10 families at a time. All the families qualify for a 502 direct, and they all build their houses together, and it usually takes anywhere from 8 to 10 months to construct these units. Again, as I mentioned, it's about 65% of the construction work is done by the families. The rest is contracted out. Most of the time it's your roofing, electrical, plumbing, concrete is what's subbed out. Loan packaging again. This is something new, and it brings up a lot of questions, but we'll try to cover it as much as possible. But applicants that engage, they have the plan, they have the option to use a loan application or packager that does these packaging. Again, sometimes there's a fee for this packaging, sometimes there's not. Rule development has implemented a certification loan packaging final rule. Basically, this says that anybody that's going to be packaging 502 direct loans needs to be certified, needs to attend a certification class, usually sponsored by USDA and either HAC, NeighborWorks, or RCAC in order to get qualified. It's usually a 3-day course, and once you're certified, you take a test online, and you become certified, and you can start packaging these 502 loans. The rule was, I think, has been moved up to June now of 2016. So this, but until then, they're still providing training and technical assistance on packaging. So again, I think it's June 16th or June of 2016 when the new rule will take place. But until then, we're still under this old new rule. Again, packaging fee is limited depending on what area you're in, and if you're a nonprofit group, you may be certified, you may be able to get a packaging fee for your 502 direct applications. Again, it's either by rural development, participating intermediaries. Right now, the way that works is an intermediary would receive the loan from the group or from the packager, review that application for completeness and accuracy, and then submits that loan to rural development, who underwrites the loan, and then a fee is paid back to the intermediary, along with maybe a portion of that going to the packagers. But you have to be a nonprofit certified packager in order to receive fees. Again, we talked about fees. They could be paid at closing, or under certain conditions can be included in the rural loan. Again, this can only happen if the loan is, or if the family or the applicant is able to carry the additional burden in that loan. And again, we talked about rural development has authorized packaging training. These are by HAC, NeighborWorks America, RCAC, and these are held out throughout the year. I think Terry mentioned a few that were mentioned earlier. We have one in Los Angeles, May 2nd through the 4th. Texas is coming up in June. The dates aren't exact yet. We have one, Housing Assistance Council is doing one on June 28th through 30th in Burlington, Vermont. And then we have our national conference, which will also be doing one. So that's pretty much it. Like I said, I'm willing to take a few questions. If I can answer them, I will. If I have to refer you to RD, we'll go from there.
All right, Jean, before we move to the questions, do you want to go ahead and do the one last poll that you have?
Yes, let's do that poll. I forgot.
All right, so the poll is up, and we're asking everyone to, again, please complete the phrase, I intend to do the following with the Section 502 direct program. So we will give everyone just a few seconds before we move to the questions. Looks like a large amount of participants are looking to package loans for RD. All right, just a few more seconds. All right, Jean, I think that's about it. I think most people that are participating on the webinar are looking to package loans for RD, with a few of them planning to do something else, good number that are not sure. And so we're going to go ahead and end the poll and move to the questions and answers. And we have a few of them coming in. So the first question we have for you, Jean, is if the 502 program can fund condos, can it also be used for co-ops?
As far as I know, yes.
Okay.
You have to, you know, if you do, when you do condos and you do the co-ops, you still have to have the homeowners association, you have the fees, you have all that. So I think the answer would be yes.
All right. The next question is from, let's see, what if they're able to get loans, to get a loan somewhere else, would they have to pay down payment if they are using 502 at 100% financing?
Would they have to provide down payment? Is that what you're saying?
Would they have to pay down payment when 502 is 100% financing?
No. You wouldn't have a down payment.
All right. Let's see. The next question is, what are the RHS site standards?
Well, basically, it's, you know, you're not in a flood zone area. You're not going to be on a contaminated hill, no radon, those type of things. You just want to make sure that it's not in a flood zone, those type of things. Basically, anything else, you know, that an arroyo or gullies, anything like that. It wasn't used as a landfill or a dump in the past, those type of things. It's nothing, you know, just basically a simple environmental review is what you're looking at. And you're looking at safe land that you're wanting to build on.
All right, thanks, Jean. One other question. If it is a large family of, say, 6 to 9 individuals, can they have a larger square footage?
The most I've seen, I think the largest I've seen for that is probably like the 1800, and then, you know, but the bedroom sizes are just a little bit smaller, or they can be redesigned. I mean, you can petition for a larger home depending on what the family can afford. If they can afford more home, or it's an energy efficient unit, there's different ways of looking at that. But, you know, you can petition for a larger unit. Right now, modest is 1800 max. But I've seen houses, large houses, where they're 4 and 5 bedroom units. So.
All right, next question. Is the 1,800 square foot limit modest requirement? Does it also apply to RD guarantees?
No, guarantee is going to be a little bit different. It depends on what you can afford. Remember the guarantee program, you can have income up to 120% of medium income, so your mortgage and your loan can probably be a lot more than what you're looking at 50 or 60% medium income. So no, it can be any size, depending on what the applicant can carry.
Okay. Next question, let's see, is there a minimum, is there a maximum and minimum loan amount?
Well, you can get that from your chart. You can get that from that email that I sent, that we have out there, or that link, and you can go to that link and it'll give you the minimum and maximum for your area. But yes, there is. But you can go to that link, and the link will tell you what the maximum loan amount is, and the maximum and minimum for your area, and the last time it was updated.
Okay. Next question, Jean. Whose income is considered for underwriting the loan?
Whoever's going to be the purchaser. So if you got a couple that's coming in, they're both going to be on the note. It's going to be both of their incomes that is verified. You know, any children under 18 or anybody that is living with them, it'll be taken into consideration, but most of the time it's knocked out during the underwriting. So you're basically looking at whoever is going to be on that note, as far as whose income you're going to verify. And there's a lot to income verification. So, it starts out with all the family income, and then little by little it'll take it out or clean it out, and it'll end up just being whoever's on that note, and it's their income that'll qualify. Now, of course, there's always certain circumstances that, each underwriting is a little bit different. You might have grandma living with you, and she gets a little bit of money and these type of things. But those are all, like I said, in the end, it's usually just the family or the buyers that are going to be on the note.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Are contractors still required to be certified with RD?
The last I heard was yes, or they can apply for certification. If they're not certified, then I think they go through the bonding process or something like that. But to be honest with you, last I heard, yes, they did have to be certified. And again, now contractors have to be certified with Energy Star, because sometimes if you're building these units and they're building these high energy efficient units, yeah, they have to be certified for the Energy Star also.
Okay, let's see. What if there are no local intermediaries? Is one required to be a packager? Is one required for a packager?
Well, no, you can submit your applications directly to USDA. Again, this is just a formula or the process that they were thinking of doing or wanted to do. They've done it in the past where it worked with some groups it doesn't work. But if there's not a local intermediary, yeah, I mean, you're going to have to submit your loans directly to the regional office or the state office. And I understand that. I think there's only 3 or 4 intermediaries nationwide, so some areas aren't going to have an intermediary that they can depend on or close by. But in those cases, I would just submit my loans to USDA and just try to make sure that they're as accurate as possible.
Okay. Can you clarify the implementation date for the final rule?
For the final rule, like I said, is June of 2016.
I think it's actually May 19th, if I remember correctly, Jean. I think it's May 19th, 2016.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. The next question, Jean, is, let's see, how can we as an agency utilize this program?
Well, there's different ways depending on your area. If you have a lot of low-income families, you can use it that way. One of the things is to get certified to become a packager. You can generate a little bit of income by packaging, but again, you have to be certified and you have to have that certificate in order to package. I would work closely with USDA offices, kind of see what their needs are, what they're seeing out there. Most states will receive a lot of 502 allocation money, and they don't spend it all, so a lot of the states will return that 502 money. It gets reallocated, and it gets to certain states that money is being used in. Again, just to use New Mexico as an example, I think we used to get, anywhere from 13, 14 million a year, and we would probably maybe spend half of that, There's been a big push to do 502 direct loans now, trainings and town hall meetings, those type of things. So those numbers are going down. But, I mean, there's ways of doing that. You could be a sponsor. You might be a contractor who want to build some of these units and go after low-income families to fill the units. You might want to be a contractor to low-income families. If USDA has families that come in, they qualify for a loan. You might want to become a contractor or an organization to come out and build units for these families that are qualified, that sometimes you can't find a contractor in the area. So there's different ways of using the 502 direct. Again, if you're looking at condos, you want to do senior housing, whatever it may be, farm labor housing. There's a lot of different ways of using the 502 direct. But again, without knowing the agency, what they're doing, those are just some of the things that they could do. And I would start out with the home buyer counseling and packaging, and then work your way up from there. And then again, you can use the 502 along with the 504. We'll be talking about the 504 next week. So again, combining some of those programs together, the 502, the 504, 523, these kind of programs, your agency could do a lot with the single-family housing. Over.
Okay, and the next question might be one that's going to get further clarified in the final rule on May 19th, but maybe, Jean, you have some additional insight, or maybe you're able to answer this before that. What is the fee for loan packagers?
Well, it was anywhere from $375 to $500. And then again, it'll depend if you go through an intermediary or if you're not going through an intermediary. Again, it'll depend. The last I heard, intermediaries were getting about anywhere from $1,200 to $1,500, and they were supposed to share $375 to $500 of that with the agency. So that's the way the breaking or the payment fee would be. But I've heard it anywhere from $375 to $500 per loan, qualified loan.
All right. The next question, and Jean, this might be one that you want to take offline if it's going to be lengthy, but if you have a quick answer as I look at the time here. But Mr. Miller wants to know, can you explain the leveraged financing scheme that is available?
Well, it all depends. There's different leverages that you can go out and apply for. Yeah, that's something that I'd have to talk on the side. But again, you can come up with home, USDA and home. You can use USDA and maybe CDBG, USDA and maybe tax credits, USDA along with maybe the weatherization program, USDA with single-family rehab. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use this and different subsidies that are available that you can bring in as a match or a subsidy, depending on what kind of program or what it is you're looking at to build with the 502 or other USDA programs. That's short and sweet, I guess.
Okay, and so Mr. Miller, we'll have Jean get with you.
Yeah, he can call me and we can talk on that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. The next question is there any chance that nonprofits will be able to package 504 products as well?
Well, that's always been a goal. We've always wanted to kind of bring that in line with the 504. In the past, there has no packaging fee available for that. There still isn't. When you do those and they say it's easy enough for a homeowner to do, but if you've ever packaged a 504, that's not true. I mean, they got to get 3 bids, they got to do work write-ups, they got to do cost estimates, they got to pick 3 contractors. So it's not something that's easy enough for somebody to do. We've always tried to push for some kind of packaging fee for the 504. I think if we received a small packaging fee on the 504, you could probably get a lot more of them in the system and processed. But for right now, the answer is no.
Okay, next question, and I'm going to try and move a little bit faster here because we're winding down in time. Can a for-profit agency receive funds for packaging loans with a trained and certified packager?
Oh, that's a good one. The last I heard is the answer is no. That you have to be a nonprofit certified in order to collect the fee, the packaging fee.
Okay.
But you can call me and I'll follow up on that.
Okay. Next question. Do assets affect whether a borrower would qualify for 100% financing?
Depending on the assets, if he has a lot of assets, you would have to have a lot. For a family, for 502, I think if it's elderly, it's $20,000 worth of assets. If it's a single, if it's 502 direct non-elderly, it's $15,000 in assets that you can have before they start coming into play in your underwriting. So again, single non-elderly 15,000, elderly 20,000, and then again, it's only a percentage that comes into play. You're not looking at the full 15 or 20,000 or whatever it may be. I think it's only like 1 or 3%, and then like again, it all comes out in the underwriting, but it would affect it a little bit, but not much. Very little, if any.
Okay, thank you. We actually have a question from Tom out at Fahi. Tom, just want to acknowledge your question, and I'm going to have Jean answer that question offline. And so I will forward that question directly to Jean so that he can answer that offline. The next question is, can a home warranty premium be financed into a 502 loan?
Well, I've seen that done in California. But, you know, California is a whole different country. But it is possible. I've seen it done with rural communities has done that in the past. And so it has been done.
Okay. Next question. Can 502 direct loans be used to refinance existing mortgage debt?
Yes. You can. Again, it depends on the loan. Depends on the applicant. It also depends that it's in a designated area that's eligible for the loan product. But yes, you can do that. You can refinance with rural development an existing loan, and at the same time, if the unit needs work, you might be able to add more money to fix the unit or to bring it up to code. So yes, you can do that.
Okay, and so we've got quite a few questions remaining. So what we're going to do is take the next 2 to 3 questions, let Jean answer those questions, and then for the rest of the questions, we will do a FAQ and post that to the website with the materials and the recording following the webinar. But the last 2 questions, the first one, Jean, is what is the minimum credit score?
Well, there is no minimum credit score because you can work with alternate credit, and this is clarification that we're going to receive. So you can come in, you know, they might have a low credit score, but you got to have 3 lines of open credit. They have to be active. They have to be current, and that's what they talk about, alternate credit. So depending on what your credit is, you know, depending on what your credit, how can I say that, the credit lines that you have open, whether they're in good standing, whether they're current, all that information plays into role. And that's why they say it's, you know, it's not credit score driven, but we can work with other alternate credits and look at that and look at the underwriting that way too. So there is no minimum. You know, unless you come in with a 0, yeah, you know, but again.
Okay, and the last question that we're going to give you, but don't hang up yet, everyone. We have some important notes that we want to share with you before we conclude the webinar. But the last question is, can 502 be used on tribal trust land?
Yes. Oh, yes, of course. We have quite a few Native American groups right now that are doing self-help housing on tribal land. We have the Zuni Nation here in New Mexico. I think they're building 20 units every 2 years. This is under the self-help using the 502 direct, and I think they're in their second contract. So I think they've already built probably maybe 20, 30 units, and they're on their second contract for another 20. We've done a lot of them on trust land. Like I said, we've developed some housing along the colonials using trust land. We have some tribals up in South Dakota that have been using straw bale self-help. It's worked real well with Thunder Valley and Pine Ridge in that area. So no, you can use the 502 on Native American lands, and that's a big push. I'd like to see that happen a lot more.
Okay, that was the last question, but a few things that we want to make specific note about before we let everyone go. Thank you, Jean. The effective date for the certified loan application packager final rule has been moved up. Again, that date is May 19th, 2016. Also, prior to the effective date of May 19th, RD will issue additional implementation guidance via an unnumbered letter, and that letter is due out in April. USDA will also host a webinar with RD staff and stakeholders to provide details on implementing the final rule in late May or early April. The link is not listed here on the screen as far as the resources go, but there is a USDA listserv that you guys should sign up for to get those alerts and all that information. We are going to insert that link on HAC's website along with all the materials and the recording from today's presentation. And so really quick before we wrap up, the recording and the materials will be available on HAC's website. Also, please be on the lookout for an email which contains your certificate of participation as well as a survey link to let us know how the webinar was, if we're delivering content that is most relevant to your housing development activities. And so at this point, I would like to thank Gene for the wealth of information that he's provided for today's webinar and ask Gene, do you want to say any closing remarks at this point?
No, just like I said, I'm available if you have questions or I wasn't able to get to your question. You're more than welcome to give me a call. And thanks for attending.
All right, so with that said, I'd like to thank everyone for attending. Also, please be on the lookout for that email and be sure to check HAC's website for all of the information and materials from today's webinar. And thank you and have a good rest of your afternoon.
Thank you. Take care.